webinar. Now, this is number 5 in our current series on business advisor skills, and today's session is the first of 2 webinars that we're going to be running on cybersecurity. So the next month we'll do a follow-up to this one, so it'll be part 2 on cybersecurity. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Barbara Wilkinson, and I am BLP's Professional Development Advisor. One of my roles at BLP is to support business advisors with the skills they need to provide high quality advisory services. And so it's my pleasure to host the second webinar series, which focuses on business advisors' skills. So in this series, we're looking at the range of skills and knowledge, as well as the systems that business advisors need to provide high quality business advice. And we're sharing experiences on what it takes to be a business advisor. Last time we looked at communication skills, so a recording of that is now available on BLP's portal. We've also looked at the legal knowledge and the financial skills that business advisors should have, as well as coaching and training. Whilst this webinar series is particularly for business advisors, these next 2 webinars, today's and next month, we've also invited people from our SME network, as well as our business advisor network, because cybersecurity is such an important topic for all businesses, not just advisory firms. So in today's session, I'm going to be joined by Tim Hamer, who's from the Cyber Emergency Response Team in New Zealand, or Cert New Zealand. And we're very lucky and very grateful to have Tim with us today, because I know he's a very busy man fighting cyber fires all over the place. But he's going to share with us a few tips and things to watch out for. So great having Tim on board. Firstly, though, Firstly, though, if I can just outline what we're going to cover, and then I'll go on to the format for today. So Tim's going to outline the support agencies that play a role in managing and responding to cybersecurity attacks, and that's including the role of his organisation, of course. And then he's going to talk about some common cybersecurity threats and how to manage them. And then, as I mentioned, we've got part 2 next month, and that's when we'll discuss, how to develop a cybersecurity policy and the things you should include in your policy, and also what to do if you get a breach. How do you respond if a breach occurs? So firstly, though, let's just go over quickly the format for the webinar today. So in terms of the format, now that we've started the more formal part, or our presentation part of the webinar, perhaps I can ask you to please keep your microphones and your cameras on mute, as this helps to ensure that we've got a good connection for everyone. So perhaps now I could ask you to mute those 2 things, please. Great, thank you. Please feel free, though, to ask any questions throughout the webinar by using the chat box, and that's located in the little message icon on the right-hand side up top on your screen. And we do welcome your thoughts, and we welcome your comments throughout the webinar, and there will also be some specific times for you to ask questions. And also at the end, there'll be a little opportunity for you, if you want to have a more informal chat and you've got some further questions, there'll be some extra time for questions too. Now, we're going to be recording, in fact we are recording the webinar now today, so what that means is that you can also access it afterwards if you want to recap on anything. It will be saved on BLP's website, and all of our webinars are actually saved on the BLP portal or website, so you can go back and review them at any stage. Okay, so I'd just like to take this opportunity for those who aren't familiar with Business Link Pacific yet. Here's just a quick rundown of what we do and what it's all about, and some of our recent achievements. So BLP is funded by the New Zealand government. It's a private, private sector development initiative, and it's delivered by DT Global. We enable SMEs to find advisory services in our network through our searchable database. And then SMEs can access subsidies through our subsidy scheme to help them with the cost of the advisory services. So of course, all our BLP approved advisors go through our competency assessment to verify that they've got the skills and experience needed to provide high quality advice. So that way SMEs can be very confident in the services that they receive from a BLP approved advisor, because they've already been vetted, of course. So we acknowledge that, it's a fact that businesses do better when they access professional advice rather than working on their own without professional advice. And so that's why we make this service available. Recently, we've launched the BLP finance facility as well, and very soon our first round of adaptation grants will be distributed to our successful applicants. BLP is now working in 8 Pacific countries. We've recently added Tonga and Kiribati to our networks. So the countries that we're now in are Cook Islands, Fiji, Kiribati, PNG, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga and Vanuatu. Now, businesses can also make good use of our free online business tools, such as the business health check that we've got, the business continuity planner, and business diagnostic tools, which help SMEs to identify areas where they may need more support. And of course, we also offer professional development and support to our network of advisors through our Business Advisor Development Program, and this webinar series, our podcast series, and also we offer customized support services to individual business advisory firms. Okay, so as this slide shows, since 2018, BLP has been growing its network of business advisors. We've now got over 120 different approved advisory firms, and that's including about 170 individual advisors across those firms. We've also got a growing network of over 700 businesses or SMEs that we've connected to advisory firms, and we've also subsidised over 800 businesses to access services. And some of those have been 100% subsidies, actually. As you can see, over 3,000 businesses have used our tools, and around 300 have completed the full business diagnostic assessment. So overall, we've identified that through BLP and our advisor network, more than 400 new jobs have been created in SMEs, and that's been a result of the support that they've had to help them grow. So we're pretty proud of those achievements. It's great to see just what impacts are happening as a result of our services. Okay, now Paul, I might just ask you if you wouldn't mind popping your microphone on mute, and I'm now going to introduce our guest for today, who is Tim Hamer. Now, Tim is a senior incident analyst at Cert New Zealand, so that's the Computer Emergency Response Team. Tim provides advice and assistance to New Zealanders to recover from cybersecurity incidents and to better secure themselves in today's digital society. Tim's experience spans the Tasman Sea. He's worked across a number of roles in both Australia and New Zealand, covering incident response, technical development, coordination of large-scale incidents, and delivering training exercises in information security. So he's got hands-on experience and knowledge, having spent the last 5 years working with the information security community across public, private, and education sectors. So Tim, welcome along. It's great to have you here, and thank you so much for offering up your time today. Really great to have you here. I do hope we're not distracting you from dealing with some current major issues, though, so thank you for joining us.
I'm sure the team can look after themselves for an hour without me. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for coming out and sparing your time this afternoon.
Cool. Now, Tim, I do just want to check. You can see a photo of yourself up on your screen, I hope, as everyone else should be able to.
I certainly can.
Oh, that's good. Fantastic. Now, Tim, can you tell us, I'm really interested to know how you get into the sort of work that you do. What did you do at university?
Sure. So I'll tell my story first. So I did a Bachelor of Computer Science at the University of Queensland in Brisbane. After that, I spent some time just doing basic IT support for the government, working for Education Queensland, ended up back at UQ working in one of their research institutes as an IT officer. And then I managed to find a job as a software developer with another cert called AusCert, which was a part of the University of Queensland. So I spent some time there developing tools and just creating a lot of things, launching the new website as well for them. And I used the opportunity to get really interested in the cybersecurity industry. So I made the transition across from developer to incident analyst there.
Wow.
And so I spent my time doing what I do now, which is helping out organizations and people with cybersecurity incidents and doing analysis of technical incidents in order to help people best mitigate them. And then after that, I decided to transition across the Tasman, come work for Cert New Zealand, did a brief stint with a bank here as a contractor, and now I'm back at Cert New Zealand again, looking after incidents.
Great. So I'm glad we stole you back from the Aussies, and you're back.
That's
Hey,
it.
you're based in Wellington, hey?
What was that, sorry?
You're based in Wellington, aren't you?
We are, yes.
Yeah, okay. But I think you might have one or two of your staff member that are based elsewhere, because I spoke to Clay the other day, and I think, Clay, you're also on the webinar today, so thank you for joining us. You're based in the USA at the moment, so it's a very special welcome to you, and thank you for making this webinar happen as well. Now, Tim, firstly, can you explain for a novice like me what cybersecurity is? Firstly.
Yeah, sure. So obviously these days we pretty much live our whole lives on the computers through some form or another. So I mean, everyone has a smartphone these days. Everyone has a computer. All our banking, all our email, a lot of our business is conducted online. So cybersecurity is really the necessary consequence of that, which is being able to protect yourself, your identity, and the network you have connected to you. So it ranges from your very technical side of things, so people making sure the software that they build is secure and has no vulnerabilities and fixing any that are found, all the way down to the individual level of making sure you have strong passwords, making sure all the security settings are appropriate for your accounts, and just practicing general good hygiene when you're surfing the internet.
Right. So obviously then, like the biggest risk with cybersecurity is A, like losing your confidential information, B, as a result of that, allowing scammers to access financial information, and potentially C, losing functionality of your systems. I mean, they're all pretty major issues for business, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the unfortunate reality is we've seen businesses fold in the wake of some cyber incidents. So it can be quite an existential threat to business. So it's important. There are a lot of simple things you can do to make sure that you've done the best possible protection you can for yourself and your business. But you do need to take these things seriously, because we have seen them have very serious consequences, both at a business and an individual level.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, obviously scammers are interested in money, and not a lot of us could afford to lose that much to a scam, but we do see it happen, and it's the consequences of it can be very upsetting and can have serious impacts on people's lives and their businesses.
Absolutely. Now I'm really interested to hear more about what your organisation does, Cert New Zealand, so Computer Emergency Response Team, and also I'm keen to hear about what other agencies and organisations are around, particularly in the Pacific region, that businesses in our network can tap into if they've got any issues. So can you firstly tell us a bit about your organisation, and then perhaps give us a bit of an overview of the support that's out there for businesses in the Pacific?
Absolutely. So the term CERT goes all the way back to 1988. It started out of a university, Carnegie Mellon, in the United States. So that was in response to one of the first computer worms, the Morris worm, which caused a lot of damage across the world. And it was someone actually seeing if they could create a self-spreading piece of software, and they succeeded too well, and it caused quite a bit of damage. And so in the wake of that, the university decided that there needed to be some kind of team that was technologically savvy and able to understand and respond to computer incidents. And since then, there's been a number of certs pop up all over the world. Cert NZ itself is quite new. We just had our 4th birthday over the weekend. So our purpose is kind of to provide advice to allow people to have a reporting outlet for any cyber issues they have. So we help people by giving them best practice advice to prevent these things from happening. And then we help people once they've been affected to help remediate and clean up the damage that was caused. So we're probably a little unusual for a cert in that we operate for all of New Zealand. So anyone can report incidents to us, and we will respond and give you the best possible advice we can. We work with a number of partners, obviously, so we have a no wrong door policy for reporting. So we work heavily with the police, and we make sure we escalate any criminal actions to them for investigation. We also work with a number of other organizations within the country, so the National Cybersecurity Centre on any more significant incidents. NetSafe as well, on the slide you'll see. So they work a lot in the space of cyberbullying, again, general advice on protecting yourself and your online identities. So in the Pacific, there is a network called PAXON, which is the Pacific Cybersecurity Operational Network. It's a collection of technical organizations across the Pacific, and its goal is to help provide a coordination point for any incidents that occur, to help get people together, help everyone to uplift each other and share experience. So if you're ever wondering where to report something in your country, it's a great starting point to see who their members are, what their member is for your country, and whether they take reports from the public. Obviously, it's very important to be aware, if you are the victim of a crime, that you do report to the police in your country. As well, there's a number of other certs operating in the Pacific, you'll see there. So PNG, Vanuatu, Cert Tonga as well. So they're all operating in an official capacity, and there are a number of other certs that are in the process of being started across the Pacific, and us and PAXON are involved in helping establish those certs. I should mention ACSC as well, just because there are a couple of Aussies on the call. So they're the Australian equivalent, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. They will handle any cyber security reports from the public or from industry within Australia. Cyber Safety Pacifica as well is a great organization that operates in a similar space as us in NetSafe, in that it provides advice on helping secure your accounts, what to do if you get compromised, and just general tips and tricks for keeping yourself safe online.
Cool. So am I right in thinking that most countries in the Pacific, perhaps they don't have any specific cybersecurity legislation, including New Zealand actually, but many countries have developed policies or strategies to deal with cybersecurity issues. So as you mentioned, New Zealand's got the cybersecurity, National Cybersecurity Centre, and it's got a National Cybersecurity Policy Office. And then, of course, there's your organisation, which is mandated by the government. So how well endowed do you think the Pacific is with dealing with cybersecurity issues? I mean, it sounds like, it's an issue that's been brought to government's attention. They might not necessarily have some legislation in place, but you've got a few organisations that you can go to that you've mentioned.
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the big the founding principles of PAXON, really, is to kind of help uplift reporting and maturity in the cyberspace around the Pacific. So I mean, as I mentioned, operating as a Cert, as Cert New Zealand does for everyone, and taking reports from the public is quite an unusual function. And so for your end personal user, there often aren't a lot of places to report malicious cyber activity that's happened to you. If it doesn't raise to the criminal level to report to the police, there's often not a lot of organizational reporting points that you can go down. I will say that if you're ever at a loss for who to talk to, we're certainly happy for you to reach out, and we can do our best to point you in the right direction.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I noticed as well on the PAXN website that all of the countries that BLP works with, they're all members of PAXN. So that's good. That's a good point of call. And perhaps at this point, I'd just like to invite any of the participants that we've got on board. If you'd like to share in the chat box any other organisations that you've found useful in your country or in your area, just feel free to pop that in the chat box at any point. Okay, cool. So Tim, from your experience, and of course, I'm sure you'll notice and you'll keep a record of the most common cybersecurity threats that plague us. But from your experience, can you perhaps share with us what some of the most common threats are, and perhaps share some ways that you can best respond to them or mitigate the risk of them occurring?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of cover off in this presentation the three major ones that we see affecting businesses most of all. So phishing is an ever-present one. We'll talk about them individually, so don't worry if you don't understand the language used right now. We'll go more into depth as we get to those slides. Business email compromise is sort of the natural consequence of phishing, where once you've gained access to someone's account, you can use that to start trying to extract money by pretending to be a business and sending out invoices or messing about with the payment channels that businesses use. Malware and ransomware as well are big ones that we see affecting businesses a lot. So malware is malicious software. It's designed to do things like steal your account credentials so that they can log into them, extract your financial details whenever you enter your credit card information on a website, for example. Ransomware is a specific kind of malware that it alters your files so that they are unreadable, and then they will try to extort you into paying to recover the files. As well, we'll also touch on some common scams that we see on a day-to-day basis, so you can be aware of them. So I'll start with phishing. So it's quite an unusual term. It doesn't immediately evoke what it is from the name, but the concept behind phishing is to create a kind of hook or a lure to get people to do some actions. And so the most common ways it comes through is through email. Often you'll see an email come through pretending to be either your bank or a big technology company, specifically your email providers. So these emails will have a call to action for you to do something. Usually, if it's pretending to be your bank, it'll say, look, we've noticed some unusual activity on your account, and we're going to suspend your account until you log in and confirm whether or not it was true. And then you follow the link from the email. It'll take you to a page that looks exactly like your bank login page, and you'll enter your account credentials. And they'll be sent to the person who sent that phishing email so that they can log into your account from there. It's very important to... Oops.
So that's pretty sneaky, isn't it? And then you can get some more targeted approaches. So I've heard of the term like spear phishing, which I guess is using the same phishing analogy, and even the term whaling. So what do they mean exactly?
Yeah, so they're the same concept, trying to trick someone into providing their credentials or financial details. So spear phishing is when the email is targeted to a specific individual. So most phishing is sort of a scattershot approach where you try and email out to as many people as possible and cast a wide net, so you can get as many credentials or credit card details as possible. Spear phishing is when research has gone into the target. So they might look through your LinkedIn, find out where you work, who you work with. They might see if any data of yours has appeared in breaches before and try to build a profile of you. They'll find out who your co-workers are, and then they'll try and use that information to craft a more convincing email to you specifically. You know, it might appear to come from your boss or your co-worker, and it might say, okay, well, I've attached you know, this document that we've been working on for the last 3 months. Could you please have a look? When you try and open the document, it might redirect you to a fake OneDrive account where you log in with your Microsoft credentials. And because they're the same as your email account, that'll give them access to your email.
All right. So actually, I think not so long ago, I think it was just last month, BLP had a phishing threat. I'm not quite sure what it was, but it sounded like somebody had got into the back end of our business health check, and they tried to promote investing in the scammer's company, but they were looking like they were from BLP. So that sounds like it was a phishing kind of scam, would you say?
Yeah, so absolutely. So again, phishing, it's kind of the first step in whatever payoff that they're looking for. So getting access to accounts, they can then use those accounts to send even more emails. And obviously everyone has their contacts within their email account. So it starts to provide the scammers with a big network of contacts to then send additional emails to. So,
right.
We often find, you know, if your account gets compromised, suddenly it will be used to send phishing to all your contacts. And then if any of those get compromised, they will be used to send out to their contact network.
Right. Yeah.
So these campaigns can kind of grow quite large in scale as people fall for them.
I think we got onto it really quickly. I know we sent out emails straight away afterwards, but we'll be talking in our next session next month on how to deal with those sorts of breaches when they happen. So what about vishing? And vishing, I hadn't actually heard of that one before. What's that? And smishing?
Yeah, so phishing and smishing, they're just different names for different channels that phishing can come in on. So your traditional phishing comes through email, but phishing is voice phishing, and smishing, which is very difficult to say, is SMS or text message based phishing.
Right.
So you'll get a lot of scam phone calls where they'll call up and say, we believe your computer has a virus, so you'll need to work with us to help get rid of it. Please install this software or this remote access tool so that we can log into your machine and fix it. So that's a very common scam that goes around. And of course, what those people do is they get access to your computer. Usually then at some point they'll request that you pay them for their service, and they'll get you to log into your online bank while they're still accessing the machine. And because they're doing that, they're able to see what password you've entered is and get access to your bank account that way.
Yeah, I had one like that not so long ago. I had someone who was calling, pretending to be from Spark, you know, our telecommunications company, saying that there was a problem with my computer, and could I just log on to my computer now, and they'll talk me through how to deal with it. I said, how do I know you're from Spark? And give me a phone number and I'll call you straight back. And then what happened is they hung up on me.
Yeah, and that's a very effective tactic for making sure they are who they say they are, is asking for an official number to call back on. Just be careful in that situation, because they can obviously give you their number, and so if you call them back, you're in the same position you were to begin with, but at least you have the ability to Google that number and see if it does belong to Spark or not.
Yeah, true. Okay, and actually, you know, the text phishing or the smishing, I seem to have been getting a few of those as well. Like typically, it's courier companies saying that I've got a parcel to pick up and to log in to find out more information. Is that something that you've found is quite common?
Yes. So the two big ones we see a lot with smishing are the couriers. So usually what they'll say is you've got a parcel held, you need to pay $1 to release it, and they'll ask for your credit card information.
Definitely that one.
The other one we see a lot will be online banking as well, where it'll say your account's been frozen because of suspicious transactions, log into your bank account here.
Right. So with Cert New Zealand being a computer emergency response team, do you can I handle those things, the phishing and the smishing as well? Because you're more they're not computer related, really, are they? Or do you still handle them anyway?
Yeah. So I mean, again, we have a no wrong door policy, so whatever people report to us, we try and find the right outlet for it. But we certainly do handle these kinds of incidents purely because at the end of the day, if someone's received a text message, but it links to a fake website, that's a computer incident in our eyes. So, I mean, there are actions they need to take. They need to change their account password, make sure there's been no unauthorized transactions on their account. So that's all information and assistance that we give to people if they had a phishing email come through. And same with phishing, right? Is if someone's trying to get you to install malicious software in your computer, that's a computer incident, even though it started from the phone call. And we do have quite close contacts with the telecommunications industry, so we actually have quite a bit of success getting numbers shut down so that people can't use them to call New Zealanders anymore.
Oh, great. Oh, that's good. Okay, so so what about business email compromise then?
Yeah, so business email compromise is kind of the next level. It usually starts off with a phishing campaign. Once scammers have gotten access to your account, they'll often do a bit of reconnaissance, find out who you are, who you work for, try and decide whether there's any financial value in the account they've got access to. It doesn't necessarily have to have started with phishing. The fact of the matter is there are a lot of data breaches that have occurred to a number of different companies. Because people tend to reuse the same passwords for a lot of their accounts, if you find a company that you were signed up to has been breached and your password was present in that data, attackers are savvy to the fact that they can try that on a number of different accounts and see if it's the same password. So either way, once they've got an initial account access they can use, if they think it's valuable enough to them, say, for instance, you work in accounts payable in a company, those are usually the juicy targets that they're looking for. They do some reconnaissance on what vendors and suppliers you work with, how often you transact with them, what your invoices look like. Once they've sort of built up that picture of information, their next step is to try and inject themselves in that cycle. It will usually involve an invoice going out to a company, and it's a legitimate invoice for services rendered. And then they'll come in over the top and say, oh, please excuse me, the invoice we sent is using our old bank account. We'd like to update the account number on the invoice to this other bank account. Could you please do so and then pay the invoice? Sometimes they'll go the extra step and completely doctor the invoice with the bank account that they're using. And so the end goal is obviously to have the supplier pay money into an account owned by the scammer. It can be very difficult to detect. It's usually not until days or even weeks down the line when the companies try and dispute why they haven't received this payment that they find out that it has been paid, but to the scammer's account. And they get very clever with how they hide their tracks in these kinds of attacks as well. So we found often they'll use mail rules on your email accounts to say, okay, well, if any emails come in from the supplier with the word invoice in the subject, immediately delete those or forward those to our other email account, delete it. And so the person in accounts receivable never realizes that the invoice came in itself, and then they'll log back in, craft it up, and then send the email.
Interesting. So I've noticed with some of the companies that I work for, if one of my invoices has a different bank account number than one of my previous invoices, then they'll ask me to verify. That's happened to me before when I've added a new bank account and use that to invoice them. So they've asked me to verify that it's actually me. So I guess that's so that they're checking that it's not a scammer that's got hold of my details.
Yeah, and that's very important advice we give to people. Like, I mean, cybersecurity isn't always a computer problem. Sometimes it's a people problem, and making sure you have good business processes and good relations with the relevant contacts in other organizations you work with is an important part of protecting yourself. So we do recommend that you have a contact with any suppliers or other organizations you work with. And if, again, you want to change bank accounts, there needs to be a human step involved where you call them on a known phone number and say, hey, we've had a request to change the bank account. Can you read it out to me and just confirm that it is what you're saying it is? So that's a very important step into helping prevent any losses like this from occurring.
I think we've got quite a number of accounting firms on the webinar today, so I think that's really good advice for them in particular. No, thank you for sharing that. So what about malware then? So can you explain what that is and how that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, it's any form of malicious software. So there's a lot of varieties out there. They have a lot of different names. Virus is kind of the original general name for malware. Ransomware is, as I said, the one that we find that impacts businesses the most. So it's software designed to what's called encrypt all your files, but essentially it alters all your files in a way that makes them unreadable. And then the bad guys will have a key to decrypt them and make them usable again. And so they deploy the ransomware to your systems, they'll encrypt all your important files, and then they'll demand a ransom payment in order for them to decrypt your files. And you can imagine most businesses operate almost entirely out of their computer networks these days. So if all your client information, if all your payment records, if all your data is suddenly unusable, we've seen a lot of businesses just be in a situation where they're unable to continue operating. And sometimes the ransoms requested can be quite hefty. So in recent years, it's become quite a lucrative industry for bad guys. So they've gotten very good at extracting the most amount of money from a company by understanding what their kind of revenues are, how much they'd be willing to pay for it. Obviously, we recommend that if you are the victim of ransomware, that you never pay a ransom. It does help fund criminals, and there's no guarantee they won't be back in the future. And it allows them to keep going, and it allows the industry to keep being profitable, so that it will continue to impact people all around the world. On top of that, you have more kind of specific individual malware. So a lot of malware will get onto your machine, operate silently in the background, and it will be looking for any time you log into a website or you use your credit card, so that it can start harvesting your account details or your credit card information. And that can then be used in the future for things like business email compromise attacks. Or just
a Trojan, what they call a Trojan horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You'll see the term trapdoor on the slide. It's alternatively backdoor, but all that is just saying they've created some way of giving themselves access to your machine without your knowledge. And then worms are a particularly interesting kind of malware that spread themselves automatically. So We see this a lot whenever there's a particularly bad vulnerability in software that's often facing the internet. So they'll create a piece of software that looks for a vulnerable server, embeds itself in that server, and then from that server, it will scan the internet for other vulnerable servers and start spreading itself across networks. And once it gets onto a server as well, it'll look at your internal network, which often has a lot more, a lot of other servers and computers attached to it that can't be seen from the internet. And so they can provide sometimes a softer target and will also be vulnerable to these vulnerabilities. So there was a particularly bad one a few years ago in what's called SMB, which is kind of a way Windows communicates between other Windows computers and servers to exchange information. And because Windows machines use that protocol pretty ubiquitously, when it started to spread, it spread quite rapidly across the world. And it was used to, in the end, spread some ransomware, which was quite destructive at the time.
And I suppose the key thing there is that it kind of just happens without human intervention, so it can go really quite far and wide. You mentioned before the Morris worm back in what was it, in the 70s or 80s that happened?
Yeah, so the late 80s, that one.
Right, yeah, that's an early one. Interesting. Okay, so what about some recent scams then? Can you talk through some ones that you've encountered recently?
Yeah, so common scams that we see all the time, gift card ones. So usually these are a little targeted. They'll do some basic research. So LinkedIn is a great tool for understanding business structures. Oftentimes the lure will be they pretend to be your boss and they say, hey, I'm in a meeting, I need some gift cards for like a company giveaway. Can you run down to the store and buy a couple of $100 worth of Hygiene's gift cards? I'm very busy in meetings for the next couple of hours, so don't try to contact me or confirm in any way. Just go buy the gift cards, send me a photo of the back with the secret code on them. And the end goal is they'll sell these gift cards on the black market for a fraction of their actual value and try and extract some money that way. Upfront overpayments is one we see used a lot to try and extract money from stolen credit cards. So this is an important one for businesses to be aware of, because the idea behind it is they will approach a business and say, hey, I'd like to order $1,000 worth of whatever you're selling, but I want to pay for my own shipping for the goods. So I'm going to give you $2,000 up front, and then I'm going to have you transfer 1,000 of those dollars to this freight company that I want to work with. Now, the freight company doesn't exist, and it's just a bank account owned by the scammers. So what happens is the business takes that $2,000, transfers 1,000 of it to that account. The owner of the stolen credit card finds out that it's been charged. The bank reverses the charges, and then the business is left $1,000 in the hole from that money that they transferred to the other account. So often it's very costly for businesses to fall prey to this one because they end up having to suffer the loss involved.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
So not necessarily a scam, but obviously big news was recently Facebook had some data leaked online, and it's kind of an important reminder that there are often data breaches that occur, and so a lot of your personal information is available in some form out there if you've ever signed up to a lot of different companies. So I know my information has appeared in quite a few breaches, and it makes it quite easy for scammers to build a picture of who you are, find ways of contacting you, and it kind of allows for more targeted attacks like we were talking about with spear phishing. And as well, it just gives more contact details in general out there for mass market spam or phishing attacks, because suddenly they have all these email addresses they can send them to.
Well, that one was just last week, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. So so the data was harvested in 2019, I think, and then it went up publicly last week. So there's a big kind of underground market where people are trying to buy and sell information all the time. Sometimes if people get bored or they don't find a buyer for what they're trying to sell, they'll just make it available publicly, and then it can become all the more dangerous because suddenly anyone has access to it. So anyone who's looking to start sending phishing emails has all this data available. And the fact of the matter is that we don't change our phone numbers that often in our lives. So, you know, even though this data was harvested a couple of years ago, it's still very relevant today. I mean, my email address hasn't changed since then. My phone number hasn't changed since then. My date of birth certainly hasn't changed since then.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, interesting. I read about that one on your website, actually, and I think there was a link to somewhere where you could check to see if your personal data on Facebook had been breached, and thankfully mine hadn't, so I was pleased about that. So that was a really good service, I thought, your organisation offered. So
that actually links to another service. It's called Have I Been Owned? Owned is spelled with a P-W-N-E-D rather than an O, but it is a service run by a man called Troy Hunt, who operates out of the Gold Coast in Australia, and he collects data breaches from all sorts of different organizations, and he offers a service where you can check if your email or phone number have ever appeared in any account breaches. So it's a really good way of finding out what data of yours is out in the public domain.
Oh, great. So cryptocurrency, that's always a challenging area. Now we've just got a little video that we're going to show, just to warn people of a scam. Now this is back from last year, so June last year. So we'll just play that.
Samina, which is not her real name, had been saving for years to buy a home. So when a trusted colleague of 12 years promised her big money by investing in the cryptocurrency One Life, One Coin, she believed her.
She basically offered me a return in my investment if I bought some packages with One Life, One Coin. That it was an opportunity to make all my dreams come true.
So she registered herself and her two sons, buying packages or tokens with one coin. She paid her friend $5,300 upfront.
After I attended a meeting, I still didn't know anything.
It was there she decided the investment wasn't for her, but by then it was too late. Her friend told her she had already verbally agreed to One Life's terms and conditions, despite never seeing them.
I said, so how do I view my account? That's when she gave me my username and password. So I just tried to navigate my way around the website and the account, and I found the terms and conditions, and that's when I realized, oh, that's not right. So I questioned her, texted, called, and just didn't get a reply, and I knew that the chances of me getting my money back was very slim.
Samina is just one of many scam victims in New Zealand, what is largely an underreported problem.
It's really hard to get the reporting on scams because a lot of people, when they've been scammed, they feel really ashamed and embarrassed, so they don't report it. So it's very, very hard for us to know what the level of scam reporting is.
Scams come in all shapes and sizes. Boy says the most common affecting Pacific communities is affinity frauds, or frauds spread through trusted communities. Last year, Samoan churches reportedly became the target of OneCoin, which saw members and ministers investing an estimated US $2.3 million.
They're taking advantage of trusted networks and trusted communities to sell products that are fraudulent and scammy, and it's the normal warning signs the scam aren't there.
Even if someone you know and love, and that includes family members, even if they're pushing that scheme to you, don't just trust. Check it out. Do some internet searches.
Commerce Commission and FMA have now partnered on a new initiative called Scam Savvy to educate Pacific communities on scammers and current scams to look out for.
The sort of hallmarks of scams are huge profit margins, very little risk, which together is impossible. No one offers that. There might be a reluctance to put things in writing, no emails, no texts.
For those people that have invested in a scam, what can they do?
Stop investing anything more right away and try to give up all contact with scammers. Talk to some people like us or talk to some trusted friends. There's some great support tools on the ScamWatch website. NetSafe have some great support for people who've been scammed as well.
If you're confused by any of these shapes and schemes, then we'd advise don't get involved.
Okay, so cryptocurrency. What's your advice about cryptocurrency then, Tim?
So it's obviously a very new concept, and it's quite an unregulated ecosystem right now. So there's a lot of scams going around involving investment in crypto schemes. Usually we find the vast majority of reports to us of crypto investments scams. There are obviously some legitimate organizations that will allow you to buy and sell cryptocurrencies, but it's very important to do your research when determining whether one of them is legit or not. I mean, the same kind of rules apply to any investments, right? If they're promising you the world and saying there's no risk involved, then those are all pretty obvious red flags that it's displaying some scammy behaviors. And one of the problems with the industry is that we have seen a lot of organizations kind of operate as legitimate trading organizations for a number of years, and then at some point one of the owners has decided to run off with all the investments in the company. So you do need to be careful when you're kind of deciding if you're going to put any money into them. It's important as well to be aware that there are a lot of scams that will take cryptocurrency as payments because it's easier for them to work with, and they don't have to worry about having accounts that they can transfer money out of internationally. So there are a lot of kind of extortion scams that go around where you'll receive an email that says, look, I've uncovered these very salacious facts about you. If you don't pay me $1,000 worth of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, then I'm going to expose you to all your friends and family. So it's kind of important if you receive email like that, that you understand that it's probably just been sent to thousands, if not millions of different email addresses, and that it's really just opportunistic to try and get people to send them money. So our advice in those situations is always just to block and ignore the sender. One variation of it, they would take passwords that have been leaked in data breaches and say, hey, I've got your password and this is proof that I have this information about you. Again, we've found in our experience that those scams have been just opportunistic. They've sent the same message to everyone. But if they do have a copy of a password you've previously used, it's important that you make sure all your accounts do not use that password anymore, and that you go ahead and make sure you change all the passwords that you currently have in use.
Okay, great.
I was lucky to get.
So, thank you. No, thanks, Tim. You've provided us with a great deal of advice already. But perhaps I could just ask you to sum up and give us your top 3 recommendations, perhaps, on how to keep your computer system secure.
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one thing you can do for yourself, in my opinion, is implement what's called multi-factor authentication on your accounts. And you'll sometimes hear it referred to as 2-factor authentication. What that is it's a separate authentication mechanism that gets used after you've entered your password to your account. So It can be in the form of a text message that you receive with a code that you need to enter after you've entered your password. It could be in the form of an app, and it will generate a temporary code for you to enter after your password. Or it might have a little notification pop up that says your account's trying to be accessed. Do you approve or deny this access? And so that's a very important security measure that you can put on your accounts. It means that if your account's password is ever compromised through a data breach or because you've entered it into a phishing page, you have that extra layer of security on top of your account. So it's not a perfect solution, but Microsoft's recent study indicates that the high 90s of unauthorized accesses could be prevented just by implementing multi-factor authentication. I think it was something like 98% of the attacks they see are able to be prevented just by having this feature enabled. Another important thing you can do to protect yourself is password hygiene. So as I mentioned, attackers are savvy to the fact that people reuse the same password across accounts. And I know I was definitely guilty of that in the past before I started working in cybersecurity. So it's kind of important that we take the time, spend a bit of life admin on a Sunday afternoon, go through all your accounts, make sure they're using different unique passwords, make sure that the passwords you're using are strong. We have some good advice on our website, and we've recently launched a campaign on password safety and password strength. So there's lots of resources you can use for creating strong but still memorable passwords. And as well, we always advise people where possible use a software or app called a password manager, which is a way of storing all your passwords, and it will even generate passwords for you. So that way you can have all your passwords be 20, 30, 40 characters long, completely random, and the password manager will just manage those for you, so you never have to remember them. And all you need to remember is the password for your password manager. So it's kind of a way of making sure all your accounts have strong passwords, they all have unique passwords, but you don't have to worry that you're going to forget them down the line. Another very important thing I would encourage people to do is just have a plan for when things go wrong or if things go wrong. It doesn't have to be super in depth, but knowing who to talk to is important before the fact. So make sure you have a chat with your bank, find out, okay, who do I need to talk to if I think there's been fraudulent access to my account? Do you have a fraud line I can call? Does it operate 24/7? A lot of businesses will obviously not manage their own IT, so making sure you know, does your IT provider offer a 24/7 service? How would you call them if something went wrong? What's the longest period of time you'd have to wait if something went wrong? So if you find there's been a problem at 7 p.m. on a Friday, does that mean you have to wait until 9 a.m. on Monday before you're able to get a hold of them? So just making sure you know who you need to talk to in the event that something goes wrong. And just some general good advice.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tim. I think on the call, on the webinar today, we've probably got quite a range of people. There might be some individuals like me who are consultants who have just got their laptop and that's their work. And then we've got some advisory firms where they're using a server and they've got an IT contractor. So yeah, a whole different range of setups from people today. Sorry, I think I cut you off mid-flow.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and like just general good advice, make sure you keep all your software up to date. So, I mean, I know sometimes people get a bit grumbly about Windows updates taking so long, but I very much encourage everyone to just restart their computer at the end of the day once they're done with work. Let it run in the background, but it's important that you keep your software up to date just to make sure your systems are as secure as they can possibly be.
Yeah, actually, I noticed the other day that my antivirus software was about to expire, and I thought I'd better update it. I've signed BLP's cybersecurity policy to say that I'll keep my antivirus software up to date, so I thought I'd better get that sorted. So I got a guy to come around, and I also had some other kind of queries and minor issues with my laptop, so I thought I'd get somebody to come in, get it checked out, and so this guy came round and he suggested that I put Malwarebytes on my laptop. So that was the software that he suggested. So that's what I've got now. I suppose it cost me $80 or something for 2 years. But I know there's some free ones out there, and there's also some that you have to pay for. So I know, like in the past, I've had Norton, and I've also had ESET, and then I think Symantec is free, I think. So I'm just not sure that I've done the right thing. Is it really necessary these days to buy antivirus software, or can you rely on the free ones? And actually, would you ever install more than one antivirus app?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we won't give out any specific advice on which software you should use. No. I will say that there are free offerings out there that I know work quite well. Do your research, definitely. I would recommend probably sticking to the well-known ones as well. There are certainly a lot of dodgy sites out there that claim to offer antivirus software. I think it's probably less common these days than it was 10 years ago, but there's certainly a lot of companies that claim to offer software that's really just malware masquerading as antivirus. So making sure you're going with a trusted name in the antivirus space, and that the company has, a history, it's respected. Read some reviews. But certainly there are some good free offerings out there. Just understanding kind of what the feature set you're looking for is. If you're just looking for general protection, then there's certainly a lot of offerings out there that you can get on the free side.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So I'd now like to give our participants an opportunity to ask some questions related to cybersecurity. So you're welcome to pop a question in the chat box, or if you prefer, you can click the raise hand button and turn your microphone on and your camera if you wish to ask your question. I see we've got a few comments in the chat function already, but please do let us know if you've got any questions. So let's just have a look. We've got, Tangaloa, you shared some information about Samsung offering people over 800,000, but you've got a claim at using Steam card from New Zealand. Is that phishing, vishing, or smishing? What are your thoughts?
So that'll depend how it came in, really. So if it's coming through an email, it'll just be standard phishing. If it's coming through a text message, then that'll be smishing. If it was a phone call, it'll be vishing. But yes, it certainly sounds to me like some kind of phishing scam.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be kind of be.
Yeah. Okay. So Tangaloa said that he thinks it was Facebook or WhatsApp.
Yes, so we just call that phishing in that case. But yes, that does sound like it's a standard gift card scam. So they're getting you to try and buy some gift cards for them and send them the codes, and then they'll be selling those for a fraction of the value of the gift card.
All right. So, and Maddie, you've said, I wonder if we'll ever come to an age where cybersecurity is not our, as in the user's concern, but the provider's one. Providers must make sure the services we received are secured with minimum effort on our part. Yeah, well, that's a good point. But what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
It's an interesting question. I think the reality is there's always going to have to be some form of awareness about security
on the user's part.
Yeah, as computers become more and more integrated into our lives, it really is kind of becoming not just a technology problem but a people problem. And the providers can do as much as they possibly can, and there's definitely some smart minds working on the problems day and night. And I've seen what some of the big providers are capable of, and you would be amazed at the amount of stuff that doesn't reach your email inbox because they're so good at detecting these things. But I mean, you can imagine the problem of deciding whether an email is malicious or good is an incredibly difficult one. And I look at emails for a living and try and decide if they're bad or good, and I struggle some days to make the right call. So, I mean, one of the problems is you're always going to be operating in a very ambiguous gray area. And so it's not just a technology problem. It's always going to be a people problem, I think. And people do need to have some sense of awareness. One thing I do think it's important to say is that I would never blame anyone for falling victim to these kinds of scams, because they're very sophisticated. The people behind them, they do it for a living. They've gotten good at what they do, whatever good means in that case. But, you know, you do need to be aware that these things are happening, and I don't think there's ever going to be a solution that fits all of the problems so neatly that you won't have to be aware of them.
No, that's a good point. No, thank you for those questions, guys. Any other questions from anyone at this point? I know we're running a little over time, but now's an opportunity if you've got any burning questions to raise your hand. In the meantime, I will just say thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you again, Tim. It's been really interesting and really insightful, so thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise today. Our next webinar is going to be in another month's time on Thursday the 13th of May, and as I mentioned before, we'll continue with this topic on cybersecurity, and we'll do part 2. So that's going to cover developing a cybersecurity policy and what to do if you fall victim to a cyber attack. Now, as I said earlier, this series is about supporting business advisors to develop the skills they need to provide high quality services. And so we invite you to tell us what topics you'd like us to cover. So please, can you complete a short questionnaire for us? Now, Sandra's just going to post the link in the chat box now, and if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link, perhaps you can tell us what else you'd like to hear more about in this series. We'd love to get your feedback on this webinar as well, and the series in general, and of course how best we can support you with professional development. So that now concludes the formal part of our presentation, but if any of you do have any further questions on cybersecurity, Tim and I will remain online for you for another few moments. So, Bawhatai lava, thank you Tomas, Vinaka, me take me ata, and I look forward to seeing you all again next month. Bye for now. Thank you. Well, thank you, Tim. I think you covered an awful lot of ground there. That was really interesting stuff, and I hadn't